My husband Jim and I took our granddaughter to visit Mount Rainier National Park recently to see the mountain, originally named Mount Tahoma, and the rest of the Cascade Range. It was gorgeous that day, with the mountain looming so close that it seemed as if you could almost touch the top of its 14,411 feet. We ate a picnic and then we climbed this tricky hill to get a better view of the entire range. It was a little steep and sandy on the path, and there were some loose rocks. So I really took my time and watched the path. I had to be careful of where I placed each footstep along the way. But every now and then I stopped and just looked around. I wanted to see how the view changed and to notice the mountain's wildflowers and to see the trees surviving just below the tree line. I wanted to watch my granddaughter as she scrambled on ahead. And I wanted to size up the path ahead too. We lingered at the top of the hill a while and took in that expansive view to the north and south along the whole range, and then descended and went on down the mountain and continued east along the Natchez River to visit a cave that we'd scoped out. So, nothing like a little spelunking to make for some memories, right? So we hiked for about 30 minutes in and entered this cave. And when we did, Jim and Brianna went on ahead of me, and I was a little distracted for a moment, fiddling with something, I don't know. And when I looked up, they were gone, and I was left to go it alone. So I ventured in, and I was watching the path, again, really watching the path super carefully. I went further in, and the more I went, the light dimmed with each step, and the path pretty much was disappearing. Now, I wear progressive lenses and have to be really careful in situations requiring depth perception, or I'll end up tripping and hurting myself. And so I was really taking my time. I was well inside the cave, picking my way along, and what I hoped was the path, and all alone. But then I stopped for a moment, and I looked back, and I looked up. And there I saw what was like the lightning bolt shaped opening to the mouth of the cave. And it was stunning, it was stunning when I photographed that with the exterior in focus. And I looked around some more at the dark ahead and turned my attention back to finding the path again. Now I was using my cell phone's light, which was kind of wimpy and barely useful. My eyes were glued to the ground, and I found my way through these huge boulders and rocks and sand. And again, after a few minutes, I stopped and stood up a little straighter and looked around because, after all, I was in a cave, and that's cool. I wanted to feel it and notice what this cave felt like. It had been carved out of the river over millennia, and there weren't any stalactites or stalagmites. There were some bats, I was told. And I felt the presence of all the rock above me, and I felt the darkness, and took my meager little light and shined it on the ceiling and revealed some of the patterns on the rock. I heard some little sounds that were not identifiable, and that made me shiver. It was really an awesome and sobering experience. I kept going along and eventually made my way out of the cave and found my family, thankfully. And in the car, I reflected on the day's experiences. On the one hand, I needed to really watch my steps and pay attention to where I was placing my feet to be safe, to find the path on the mountain and in the cave. But I also needed to stop and kind of straighten up and look around. I realized how much I would have missed if I'd not paused to take in each of these experiences and see the views. So why am I telling you this? Why am I telling you about my summer vacation? Because the same is true for us as leaders. We can get so caught up in the path that we're on, in the steps that we're taking, in the urgencies and pressures of trying to keep up and do all that we need to do, that we don't really see what's happening. We can easily miss the big picture and not appreciate how far we've come and what's around us right now, nor get a sense of what's ahead. And this is why this spaciousness that I've been talking about in recent episodes is so important. This spaciousness makes it easier for us to stop moving, to stop looking down, to stop being consumed by the details. Instead, spaciousness gives us the chance to look up, to look around, and to really notice what's going on. We can see where we've been and where we are right now and what's really happening. We can look ahead, too, and consider what the decisions we've made mean if we continue as we planned. We can see how things are coming together, what it's taking to get those things done, and if that's what we want, what our customers want, if it's what's needed now. And then we can course correct, we can make new decisions, or we can stick to the path we've set, whatever the case may be. But what's certain is that we can't assess any of this if we don't pause to raise our gaze and look around. We have no chance to overcome our decision biases either if we aren't even pausing to realize that we may have the opportunity and need to make new decisions. So let's say you've created some spaciousness and you are pausing to look around at your business, your products, your services, your operations. You're pausing to look around at your team's priorities, your progress, and what it's taken to get there. I want to share a set of reflection questions that you may find helpful, and you can use these yourself, and you might even invite your team to join you in using them too. For nearly 20 years, I've been inspired by a questioning process that I learned from the Institute for Cultural Affairs in their technology of participation. I returned to it again and again, and I adapted it to the needs of the moment in all kinds of different ways. I just find it really useful. And in fact, I'd encourage you to check out ICA-international.org, the ICA International Organization, to learn about their programs. So this process that I'm going to describe is adapted from that process that I learned from them. The process of reflection moves you from concrete observations to reflection, to interpretation, to decision. And I've discovered over the years that we tend to skip over some of these steps and miss the benefits of each type and phase of this thinking. So I want to encourage you, as I describe this, to take your time with these questions. So as you pause in your spaciousness, hopefully, and look around, ask yourself, what do you see? What stands out from the last year? What's happening now? What does it feel like? What are people saying about what's going on right now? What data do you have about this? And what actions or reactions stand out? Sort of observing, what do you see? And then, what does all this remind you of? What's exciting, joyful, or inspiring? What's boring and worrisome and just downright confusing? Does anything make you concerned? What gives you hope? And I love thinking about it this way. What would be the soundtrack for this? If you were to give this a soundtrack, what would that soundtrack be? And then, what's important about all of this? What new view does this give you? What difference might this make? What options are opening up to you? What's emerging? What changes might be needed? What values are you living in this? And then finally, what could this be about? What does this mean to you? What have you learned? What will you do differently? What should remain the same? And what is your resolve now? Now, those are a lot of questions, and I'll try to have those posted in the show notes and make them available. And what I've discovered in reflecting on those questions, answering those questions, and sitting with them is that the answers to them may need to emerge. There's a lot there. And sometimes I find that I answer them and then I sit with that answer and realize, oh, actually, there's another answer. And it can take us time. It can take steps to get to what's real and true. And so be with those questions, linger over them, wrestle with them, sleep on them, wake up in the middle of the night and answer them again, and see what comes forward for you. And then as you're determining, are there decisions to be made, realize that we have a bunch of cognitive and emotional biases working on us in these moments. And there are two in particular that I want to share. I want to share the definitions provided by the Decision Lab that I think are especially relevant as we pause and look around and consider things. One decision bias is the sunk cost fallacy, which is our tendency to follow through on something that we've already invested heavily in, whether it's our time or money or effort or emotional energy, even when giving up is clearly a better idea. And then the second decision bias is our commitment bias. And this is our tendency to remain committed to our past behaviors, especially those things that we've been public about, even if the results aren't what we'd hope. So for me, in the spaciousness I created, I use these reflection questions on my own and in dialogue with colleagues to get clear. And when I looked around and took in what was true now and what my goals are, some new decisions emerged, or some things that I, was tending toward. But then I had to grapple with the powers of sunk cost fallacy and commitment bias. I really felt the pressure of having invested a lot in some things and asked myself, shouldn't I keep going? It felt really uncomfortable to think about ending something that I had invested in. And I really felt the pressure of not wanting to let people down and wanting to be consistent about what I'd been public about. But with support and a lot of clarity, I made a set of hard but important decisions to end some programs and to create some new ones and to pause some activities and double down on some others. I'm now focusing on a few core offerings and, importantly, on writing my book with urgency to activate and support loving leaders, because it's time. And after nearly a decade of research and speaking and writing and teaching, and after pandemic interruptions and distractions, it's time. I'm really feeling in the depths of my soul just how much it's time to love boldly, how much it's time to stop hesitating, how it's time to stop waiting for permission to be a loving leader. It's time to start leading with love wherever you are right now. If you want to uplift people so they know that they belong, if you want them to know that you see them and help them grow, if you want to create a respectful, trusting workplace where people can bring and do and be their very best, if you want to work with meaning toward a shared goal, then it's time. It's time to lead with love. It's time to be a loving leader. This is my conviction. And this is what I'm focused on at A Human Workplace, not all the other flavors of positive workplace offerings that we've been kind of swimming in and trying to respond to people with during the pandemic. But I am focused on loving leaders. And this is clearly what came up when I paused in the spaciousness and looked around and took stock and reflected. And this is what came up for me when I overcame those decision biases and got clear about how I need to double down on my purpose because it's time. So I just want to ask you, where are you right now? Look around, take stock, get clear, and then decide what is helping you advance your purpose and what needs to end. What is it time for you to do? And then do that with all your heart, because it's time to lead and work with love. Before I close, I want to offer a couple of things that may help in all of this. One is that I have a new Loving Leaders email list that I want to invite you to join. I'm motivated to share more thinking and practice throughout the week. And so in this particular email list throughout the week, I'll be sharing multiple heartfelt insights and practical tips on becoming a loving leader. And all these are drawn from my personal experience and research. And so there'll be a link to join in the show notes, or you can just reach out to me on LinkedIn or on our website. And if you feel an urgent desire for support on your journey as a loving leader, please reach out to me at renee@makeworkmorehuman.com. I can share about a new program for those who are pursuing loving leadership and who know for themselves that it's time. All right, see you next time. Now go make work more loving and human.